So you've seen the news about the debt ceiling talks going on right now. Republicans and Democrats are arguing again, and it's always the other side's fault, you know. If you haven't heard about the debt ceiling dilemma the US is facing, I have no clue why you clicked on this video, but since you chose to, here's a picture of a cute cow to look at while you click subscribe. Anyway, so on to the real reason why you're here. You're wondering what will happen if the debt ceiling doesn't get raised. Well, I did the research so you wouldn't have to. Here are 5 things that will happen if the government breaches the debt ceiling. First, government services will be slashed. In the short term, if the US goes into default or runs up against the debt limit, government services will be paid on a first obligation paid first basis. For example, if the US Treasury has no money in it on June 1st, and on June 1st they have to make $100 billion in payments, $50 billion of which going to Medicare, and let's say that they get $25 billion in tax revenue, they would not be able to meet all of these spending obligations, but they would pay what they could. And the next day when they're supposed to send out $25 billion in Social Security benefits, even if they get another $25 billion in taxes that day, they're supposed to spend it on the obligations that they weren't able to pay from the day before. So if the debt ceiling is not raised, we should expect to see Social Security and other benefits be delayed. Long term, if no agreement is reached, the government will have to cut spending significantly. This would lead to extreme austerity measures. The law will require the US to continue payments for entitlement programs such as Social Security and Medicare. However, the government can't borrow to pay for them. So they'll need to make massive cuts to discretionary spending by canceling many programs to try to come in under budget and afford those entitlement programs. Second, higher interest rates. If the debt ceiling is breached, the odds of the government defaulting spike considerably. This increased likelihood of default means that US Treasury bonds will become riskier to investors. And riskier investments oftentimes have higher interest rates, which makes borrowing much more expensive for the borrower, in this case the United States government. Investors are already selling off bonds in case the government isn't good for their value at maturity. Generally, US bonds are considered one of the safest investments, so if the US government defaults and the interest rates on government bonds spike, it will lead to higher interest rates in the general market and lead to higher borrowing costs for everybody. Third, market panic. What do you get when one of the most financially trusted governments on the planet isn't sure if they can pay their debts and interest rates are spiking? Panic. Obviously, this is not good for the market. And if you've heard about the Treasury being able to perform a debt suspension period, they already started doing that on January 19th of 2023. This essentially means that the Treasury is doing everything they can to push back the day that the US breaches the debt ceiling and can no longer borrow. They do this through strategic cuts to things like reducing investments into postal workers and other federal employees' pension funds. If there's no agreement made before the debt limit is breached, some economists project a fallout worse than the 2008 financial crisis. Fourth, political instability. Not that our political system needs any more instability, but if the debt ceiling doesn't get raised, the stuff we've seen recently is going to look like peanuts. Despite the fact that raising the debt ceiling should be a fairly routine thing the government does every couple of years, I mean it's happened 42 times since 1981, historically debt ceiling brinksmanship tends to happen when the party in the White House is different than the one that controls Congress. And so the party controlling Congress tries to get concessions from the president's party, and this time, both sides of the aisle have seemingly decided to make this their hill to die on. Democrats have accused Republicans of holding the economy hostage and are proposing funding cuts to programs that benefit the most vulnerable. While the GOP has taken aim at the less reckless spending and its effect on the economy more broadly, making clear that raising the debt ceiling without cutting spending would be irresponsible. Now, I think the right choice is probably somewhere in between these two, but nobody wants to compromise. Let me know what you think each side should do in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. But it remains to be seen just how much of this is political posturing. But if the ceiling isn't raised, the US would be likely to lose some of its standing in the geopolitical arena, which we'll talk more about in the fifth impact. Fifth, long-term effects. So let's say Congress doesn't raise the debt ceiling, leading to a default. That could very well lead credit rating agencies to permanently downgrade US debt, and the impasse could have long-standing effects on America's economic standing in the world, as well as the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency. The dollar has come under scrutiny recently as many countries like China, Brazil, and Russia have sought to reduce their exposure to it. These countries don't like that the USA, through the Federal Reserve, can largely control interest rates for the entire world, and they don't like that if they do something the US doesn't like, I don't know, invade Ukraine, that the US can sanction them. Some news outlets claim that foreigners hold the majority of US debt, which is not true. The majority of US debt is actually held by US citizens. However, foreign nations are still major holders of US debt, and they could choose to sell or stop buying US bonds entirely, which would make the cost of the US carrying debt even more expensive, as they'd have to raise interest rates to convince more people to buy. Now, I know this all sounds pretty doom and gloom, but since I'm not Graham Stephan, I'll tell you the truth. A default is not the most likely outcome. Most serious market observers put the odds at only about 10%. Even still, that is a serious concern. If we could get the Vegas odds, maybe we'd have a better way of knowing how likely it is to actually happen. Then again, those odds also had the Celtics beating the Heat, but that's beside the point. Even still, it would be tough to find a worse time for this to have happened. With economists having projected a recession coming for almost a year now, and only recently saying that they think that we might be in the clear, it's like the US is a boat just emerging from a hurricane barely intact, and Congress is saying, this looks like a nice place, let's put our anchor down here. Even if things turn out, when something similar to this happened in 2011, economists found that the Treasury paid $1.3 billion in higher borrowing costs as Congress bickered for 8 months leading up to a 3-day government shutdown before the Obama White House and Republican-controlled House of Representatives were able to come to a resolution on the matter. And interest rates were a lot lower then, suggesting that the cost this time could be much higher. So what's most likely to happen? In reality, the United States is quite unlikely to default. Either everyone is going to get their crap together, admit they were all bluffing, compromise and raise the limit, or the government is going to have a partial or complete shutdown where they suspend access to national parks, non-essential services, and or people see delays in when they get their Social Security checks. Personally, I think that the government is going to raise the debt ceiling. However, they're not going to cut as many services as Republicans would like, and they're not going to raise the limit by as much as Democrats think they should. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe button. That cute cow from earlier is counting on it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. You can click here or here for more cool videos, and I'll see you guys next time.